Do I like Hulk Hogan? No, I don't. I think he's a phony piece of shit.
Never. Can't trust him.
And Hulk Hogan goes, well, if I'm an N-word, I'm a good N-word.
Hulk Hogan's death opened the floodgates as wrestlers finally began exposing years of manipulation and exploitation, what some are now calling grooming. From sex scandals to targeting vulnerable talent, the revelations are deeply disturbing. Even his own daughter's recent statements hint at something dark beneath the surface, and one accuser reportedly has tapes to back it all up. Let's start with the biggest controversy of them all, the infamous sex tape scandal. This was the incident that destroyed Gawker Media and earned Hogan a staggering $140 million payout. But most people still don't know the real story behind it. That's where Bubba the Love Sponge enters the picture. Yes, that's his actual name. And trust me, the story gets just as wild as it sounds. Back in 2007, while Hogan was going through his divorce, he was staying at Bubba's house. According to Bubba himself, Hogan was at rock bottom during this time, so broken that he was reportedly suicidal.
He was suicidal. I had to take a gun away from him at one time. He was going to kill himself.
So Bubba, trying to play the role of a good friend, apparently told his wife to take care of Hogan. And yes, that means exactly what you think it does.
And I just told her, I said, hey, Heather, have a little sexy outfit on and take care of my boy when we get home.
Now, Bubba insists that everything that happened was completely consensual between three adults. But here's where things take a dark turn. The entire encounter was captured on Bubba's home security cameras. And, according to him, the footage was stolen by one of his own employees while Bubba himself was dealing with a messy divorce.
Well, one of my employees stole it. I didn't know it was stolen until one of my producers, Brent Hatley, calls me March 4th, 2011.
But here's the plot twist that feels straight out of a Netflix drama. When they couldn't sell the tape legally because no one had signed the release forms, they allegedly tried to extort Hogan for $1 million. And get this. Instead of giving in, Hogan and his lawyer contacted the FBI and helped set up an entire sting operation.
But what they don't know is that Hogan and David Houston called the FBI and said, we're being extorted. So they're in there, and Hogan writes a dummy check for $150,000 to buy back this tape.
While most people believe Bubba betrayed his friend, the truth is that Hogan was the one playing 4D chess. He managed to turn a scandal that could have destroyed him into a $140 million victory. You have to admit, the man knew how to spin chaos into opportunity, even if the entire situation was completely insane. But things didn't stay in his favor for long. During the legal process, those infamous racist audio tapes surfaced, and suddenly, Hogan went from celebrating a massive win to being fired from WWE and watching his entire legacy crumble. Now, let's talk about his family life, because if you thought the sex tape saga was wild, his marriages were pure reality TV drama. His first marriage to Linda lasted 26 years. But ended in one of the most explosive celebrity divorces ever. In her memoir, Linda accused him of physical abuse, claiming he threw lamps and even held her by the throat during heated arguments. But the biggest shock came when it was revealed that Hogan had allegedly been having an affair with Christiane Plant, a woman who was reportedly close friends with his daughter, Brooke. Yes, you heard that right, his daughter's friend. The level of mess here is unreal. The divorce settlement hit Hogan hard, with Linda reportedly receiving 70% of their liquid assets, 40% ownership in his companies, and a $3 million property settlement. Hogan later said this left him nearly broke, which makes his later $140 million Gawker win all the more unbelievable. And speaking of his kids, let's talk about the Hogan Knows Best reality show era, because looking back now, some of those father-daughter moments with Brooke were more than a little uncomfortable. In March 2025, Brooke publicly came forward with shocking allegations against both her parents, calling them sex addicts, and describing their behavior as deeply inappropriate. The family dysfunction was undeniable. Linda later revealed in a 2025 video that she hadn't spoken to Brooke in nearly 8 years and blamed Hogan for tearing the family apart. Just days before Hogan's death, Linda posted a strangely nostalgic message about their good old days, which instantly sparked conspiracy theories about its timing. Then there's Hogan's son Nick and that tragic 2007 car crash that left his friend permanently disabled. Hogan's reaction to the incident made things even worse during jailhouse phone calls. He made bizarre comments about it being God's will and even expressed relief that Nick wasn't reincarnated into a worse situation. The lack of empathy was staggering. And if that wasn't enough, Hogan's business relationships weren't much better. Remember the Richard Belzer incident from 1985? During a live wrestling demonstration, Hogan accidentally injured the TV host, leaving him unconscious. Belzer later sued, and Hogan ended up settling for $400,000. This wasn't some wrestling stunt gone wrong. This was Hogan being careless with someone who had no business taking wrestling moves in the first place. After his first marriage fell apart, Hogan married Jennifer McDaniel in 2010, but that union only lasted 11 years. Interestingly, their relationship overlapped with the chaos of the Gawker lawsuit, and while McDaniel publicly supported him through the trial, reports later suggested that the scandal took a heavy toll on their marriage. Then, in 2023, at the age of 69, Hogan married Sky Daly, a yoga instructor 25 years younger than him. His children didn't even attend the wedding, which says a lot about how fractured his family ties had become. Later that same year, the couple got baptized together, with Hogan calling it a fresh start and a new chapter in his life. But here's the shocking part. While all this personal drama was unfolding, more and more wrestlers began coming forward with their own stories about Hogan's behavior behind the scenes. It wasn't just about the racism or the manipulative backstage politics. It was a consistent pattern of ego and self-interest that seemed to poison everything around him. Matt Bourne, the man behind the Doink the Clown character, outright called Hogan arrogant and fake, saying, "He's a phony inside and out." Bourne even believed Hogan refused to work with him at WrestleMania 9 because of personal grudges. And then there was Vince Russo, who famously clashed with Hogan during their WCW days, even going so far as to bury him in a live promo that sparked years of bad blood. When your own booker starts calling you out on live TV, you know the pattern has gone too far. Hogan's toxic behavior didn't just stay confined to one part of his life, it spread through everything he touched. His family, his friendships, his business dealings, and his wrestling career all bore the weight of his chaos. The man was a walking storm of drama, leaving a mess wherever he went. Even toward the end of his life, his health became another headline. After undergoing more than 25 surgeries from years of wrestling injuries, rumors began swirling that Hogan was on his deathbed. His wife, Sky, had to step in to shut down the speculation just weeks before he actually passed away. But even then, the drama wouldn't stop. Some people claimed the family was hiding how sick he really was, while others accused Hogan of exaggerating his condition for attention. It seemed like he couldn't even be ill without controversy chasing him. Now, let's talk about the scandal that truly shattered his image, the one that got him fired from WWE in 2015. You already know the one. The leaked audio where Hogan used the N-word multiple times and made shocking remarks about his daughter dating black men. He even said, and I quote, I don't have double standards. I am a racist to a point. It was a career-ending revelation, and it completely destroyed the image of wrestling's so-called golden. Boy, but here's where things start to get even speecher. Wrestlers weren't just angry about the racist comments, they were furious that years of Hogan's toxic behavior had finally been dragged into the light. Scott Steiner, and Big Papa Pump never holds back, straight up called Hogan a piece of trash and a mother from actor in interviews, saying there's a reason fans booed him in California. According to Steiner, all the racist remarks and scandals just exposed what many in the locker room already knew, that the image WWE and WCW tried to sell of Hulk Hogan was never the real man behind the character. And honestly, Steiner was only saying out loud what plenty of wrestlers had been thinking for decades, because the racism scandal was just the tip of the iceberg. Hogan's questionable behavior stretched all the way back to the 1980s. Remember when Jesse Ventura tried to form a wrestlers' union back in the day? Well, rumor has it that the person who ratted him out to Vince McMahon was none other than Hulk Hogan himself.
And he's the one that ratted me to Vince when I tried to unionize.
Ventura was so furious about the betrayal that he swore he'd never speak to Hogan again, calling him an office stooge. Just think about that, trying to help your fellow wrestlers fight for better pay and safer working conditions, only for your so-called friend to sell you out to management. That's next-level snake behavior, but it doesn't stop there. Even The Undertaker, one of the most respected and loyal figures in wrestling history, had his own issues with Hogan. Taker revealed that he was always cautious around him, saying his radar was constantly up whenever Hogan was nearby. He even admitted that he completely lost trust in Hogan after Hogan faked an injury, proving that even the locker room's most honorable figure saw through the act.
He goes, "Hey brother, can I talk to you? I'm really nervous about taking the tombstone."
Apparently, Hogan was nervous about taking The Undertaker's finishing move, but after the match, he claimed that the move had injured him. The problem? The footage clearly showed he was completely fine. The Undertaker later called him out for lying about the whole thing, and that's when the cracks in Hogan's credibility really started to show. But here's where things get even messier, and trust me, this is some premium tea. Bret Hart, who's never been the type to hold back his opinions, has been calling Hogan out for decades. Hart accused Hogan of sabotaging his career by refusing to drop the WWE title to him cleanly back in 1993, showing that the tension between them wasn't just professional, it was personal.
Do I like Hulk Hogan? No, I don't. I think he's a phony piece of shit.
Damn, Bret, tell us how you really feel. But seriously, Hart said Hogan had promised to put him over only to back out at the last minute, claiming that Bret wasn't on his level. The disrespect was next level, and it wasn't just the top stars who had issues with him. Even wrestling royalty like Bruno Sammartino wasn't impressed. Bruno flat out said, "I was never a fan of Hogan because I was never impressed with his quality of performance in the ring." Coming from Bruno, that's like getting roasted by the godfather of wrestling himself. But here's a wild detail that most people have never heard. Lou Ferrigno, the actual Incredible Hulk, didn't even buy into Hogan's claim of having the largest arms in the world.
Hulk Hogan does not have the largest arm in the world because in competition my arms are 23.5 inches whole when I was competing.
Imagine getting your bodybuilding claims fact-checked by the guy who literally inspired your wrestling persona. The secondhand embarrassment is unreal. But maybe the most heartbreaking part of Hogan's story comes from his fallout with Randy Macho Man Savage. Their real-life friendship turned into bitter real-life beef, and it had nothing to do with scripted rivalries. Word has it that the tension stemmed from Hogan allegedly crossing the line with Savage's wife, Miss Elizabeth. That infamous promo Savage cut on Hogan? It wasn't just entertainment, it was years of bottled-up frustration spilling out on camera. Fast forward to more recent times, and the drama didn't stop, even after Hogan's death. Mark Henry, one of the most respected figures in wrestling, said Hogan deserved the boos he got from fans. He even offered Hogan a path to redemption by visiting black schools together, but according to Henry, Hogan turned it down flat. The man had a real chance to make things right and still said, "Nah, I'm good." The audacity is wild. And it's not just veterans calling him out. Modern wrestlers haven't exactly been showing Hogan love either. CM Punk, never one to hold his tongue, said he had zero respect for Hogan after those racist tirades surfaced. And MJF, the modern-day master of villainy, didn't hesitate to call Hogan a liar and a racist, even while acknowledging his undeniable impact on the business. The Iron Sheik, who you'd think would be grateful since losing to Hogan helped launch Hulkamania, spent years calling Hogan a piece of garbage and cursing him out on social media. This is the same man who gave Hogan his biggest career break, and even he couldn't stand him. Then there's Billy Kidman, who got completely buried by Hogan during their WCW days. Hogan once said Kidman couldn't draw flies at a flea market, and that kind of toxic attitude crushed the confidence and careers of so many wrestlers who crossed his path. The wildest part is that none of this was just wrestling drama or scripted storylines. These were real issues people had with Hogan's character, his manipulative backstage politics, and the way he treated others in the business. We're talking about a pattern that stretched across decades and promotions, leaving tension everywhere he went. Even Roddy Piper, who was one of Hogan's greatest on-screen rivals but actually friends with him outside the ring, had some revealing things to say before he passed away.
I don't hear people saying all the great things he's done.
Even Roddy Piper, who genuinely tried to defend Hogan, seemed to struggle to find anything positive to say that didn't just revolve around his influence on the wrestling business. And that really says a lot. The truth is, Hogan's legacy is one of the most toxic in wrestling history. People often forget that he wasn't just another wrestler with personal issues. He was the face of professional wrestling during its biggest boom period. That meant his behavior, both in and out of the ring, set the tone for how the entire industry operated. And that standard? It was toxic to the core. Take the steroid scandal, for example. This one hits differently when you understand how deep it went. During Vince McMahon's 1994 federal trial, Hogan took the stand and admitted he had been using steroids for over a decade, while at the same time preaching, train, say your prayers, and eat your vitamins, to millions of kids who saw him as a hero.
Those people that have carried on even without me have turned into my heroes instead of my friends.
Just think about that for a moment. This was a man who built his entire image around being a clean living hero, preaching discipline and honesty to millions of kids, all while secretly using performance-enhancing drugs for years. The hypocrisy is unreal, and it helped create a dangerous culture in wrestling where athletes felt pressured to risk their health just to keep up. Bob Backlund, the champion before Hogan, even called him out, saying, "Hogan was a great person in the ring, but we didn't like his outside activities. We thought he wasn't a good representation of the business or a role model for young people." But the steroid scandal was just one part of a much bigger problem. Hogan's backstage politics were the stuff of legend, and not in a flattering way. He was one of the few wrestlers who had creative control built into his contracts, and he used that power to protect himself at the expense of others, burying careers whenever it suited him.
Well, if I'm making twice as much money as you and you're wrestling me, is that a work? That's up.
That quote sums up Hogan's mindset perfectly. Everything was about him and how much money he could make, no matter who got hurt in the process. He treated wrestling like a zero-sum game where his success could only exist if everyone else lost. Jeff Jarrett once described Hogan's behavior at Bash at the Beach 2000 as the most self-centered, egotistical power play that benefited no one but Hulk himself. And that wasn't a one-time thing, it was a consistent pattern throughout his entire career. Hogan used his fame and creative control to protect his spot at the top, often destroying other wrestlers' momentum in the process. The damage this did to WCW was massive. Many wrestlers have said that Hogan's constant backstage manipulation and refusal to cooperate were major factors in the company's collapse. Imagine that $1 billion wrestling empire partly undone by one man's ego. And the cycle didn't stop there. When Hogan joined TNA Wrestling, Scott Steiner literally warned the owner, saying, "Hulk Hogan will run you out of business." And sure enough, after Hogan's time there, TNA never really recovered. The pattern couldn't have been clearer wherever Hogan went. Chaos wasn't far behind. But what's really twisted is how the wrestling industry kept enabling him simply because he made money. It created a toxic environment where being a draw meant you could do whatever you wanted without consequences. And even top stars weren't immune to it. Shawn Michaels, for example, had his own issues with Hogan after he changed their match plans at the last minute before SummerSlam 2005. Hogan refused to let Michaels win, so in protest, Michaels spent the entire match overselling every move in a sarcastic performance that fans still talk about today. When even HBK, who had his own reputation for being difficult, was fed up with your antics, that says everything.
He comes over, sits in a chair, and beforehand, Vince tells me, when Hogan sits down, I want you to get right up in his face. I want your nose this close to his nose. I want you up out of the chair like this.
Kurt Angle once told a story that perfectly captures how difficult Hogan was to deal with. Even Vince McMahon had to play mind games just to get him to cooperate. When the owner of the company has to intimidate you just to make you do your job, that says everything about the kind of person you are. But nothing highlights Hogan's ego more than his obsession with being seen as the strongest and most dominant figure in wrestling. Take his famous body slam on Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3. By that point, Andre was suffering from severe health problems, but Hogan turned the moment into this larger-than-life achievement, as if he'd pulled off the impossible. He built his entire legacy on moments like that, grand spectacles that often came at the expense of other wrestlers' dignity. And when you look at the racism scandal, it wasn't some isolated incident. It was part of a much bigger pattern of discriminatory behavior that stretched across his career. MVP publicly called him out as a racist, and several black wrestlers have said they felt unwelcome or overlooked in locker rooms where Hogan held influence.
Following day in catering, it's crazy. Macho Man Savage, Hulk Hogan, my brother and myself, we're in catering. And Hulk Hogan goes, "Well, if I'm an N-word."
Even Booker T, one of the few who tried to defend Hogan, couldn't ignore how bad things really were. He admitted that the kind of language Hogan used backstage wasn't just a one-off, it was casual, normalized, and accepted in catering and locker rooms. Shelton Benjamin recently called Hogan out again, saying flat out that the man lied about him and reminded fans of his long history of bigotry. Decades later, wrestlers are still cleaning up the mess he left behind. And the lies? That might be the most infuriating part. Hogan didn't just exaggerate, he invented. From claiming Metallica wanted him as their bassist to boasting about wrestling 400 days a year thanks to double shots, Hogan built his legacy on ego, not truth. Even late in life, the pattern never changed. When he showed up on WWE Raw in January 2025, the crowd booed him relentlessly, not just because of the scandals, but because fans were finally done pretending. Sid Justice later called out Hogan's tantrums and attention-seeking behavior on his reality show, proving that the same toxic traits that poisoned locker rooms followed him into his personal life. The wrestling industry is still living with the toxic culture that Hulk Hogan helped create, an environment where harassment was normalized. Racism was ignored if it sold tickets, and younger talent got buried for daring to outshine the veterans. Even after his scandals came to light, Hogan never seemed to understand the damage he caused. His apologies felt hollow, his redemption attempts self-serving, and even in his final years, drama followed him everywhere. His wife, Skye, constantly denied rumors about his health, while conspiracy theories surrounded his passing. It was the perfect reflection of a man whose life was defined by controversy. But the silver lining is that wrestling has finally started to evolve. Modern stars like Seth Rollins openly said Hogan deserved to be booed, and voices like Vince Russo exposed how his ego poisoned creative decisions. The days of protecting toxic legends are fading, replaced by a new generation that values accountability over fame, a shift that proves the business is finally learning from its past.
What I see is an empty shell of what you used to be.
Even Vince McMahon, the man who made millions off Hogan's back, eventually had to admit that the Hulkster's persona had become hollow, a shell of what once drew crowds. This wasn't storyline drama. It was real frustration with how Hogan's ego was hurting the business. His toxic influence extended far beyond the ring and into every venture he touched. Take Pastamania, his failed 1990s restaurant project. It bombed spectacularly because Hogan couldn't just be the face of the brand. He had to control everything, even the menu. That same obsession carried into his later years with ventures like Real American Beer, another desperate attempt to cash in on nostalgia while ignoring the dark cloud of his past. The worst part? Hogan's behavior became a model for others. Wrestlers learned that politics, manipulation, and ego could get you further than talent or respect. He turned toxic behavior into a business strategy. The steroid culture he helped glamorize left lasting scars on the industry, both physically and mentally. To this day, wrestlers are still paying the price for the standards Hulk Hogan set. Even Hogan's political involvement in his later years reflected the same tone-deaf attitude that defined much of his career. His 2024 appearance at the Republican National Convention, where he dramatically ripped his shirt in support of Donald Trump, was widely criticized, especially given his history of racist remarks. But what truly spoke volumes was the reaction to his death. Yes, WWE and other promotions issued official tributes, but the personal responses from wrestlers were subdued, almost cautious. Compare that to the genuine emotion that poured out when legends like The Undertaker or Stone Cold Steve Austin were honored. It's night and day. The restrained tone said everything. For once, the industry wasn't afraid to speak the truth about its former golden boy. Hogan's passing became a symbolic line in the sand, a moment where wrestling finally started rejecting the toxic culture he represented. Because the most damaging part of his legacy isn't just the scandals or the lies, it's the idea that being a draw excuses everything. That mindset poisoned the industry for decades, enabling abuse, racism, and manipulation behind the scenes. Now, through documentaries, podcasts, and honest conversations, the wrestling world is finally confronting that truth. The dark side of wrestling didn't start with Hogan, but he embodied it, and his fall has forced the industry to reckon with the culture he helped create. Even Hogan's family life mirrored the chaos of his professional career, the dysfunction on Hogan Knows Best. The public divorces and the strained relationships with his own children became a cautionary tale for wrestling families everywhere. Proof that when toxicity goes unchecked, it doesn't just stay in the locker room, it follows you home. What's truly tragic is that Hogan had countless chances to evolve and use his fame for good, but every time he chose ego over empathy, image over integrity, and power over principle. His real legacy isn't just about the moments that made wrestling mainstream, it's about how he normalized selfishness, racism, and manipulation at the top of the business, showing a generation that success could excuse bad behavior. But the industry is changing. The new generation of wrestlers and fans aren't tolerating that old school toxicity anymore. They're proving you can be a star without burying others. That leadership doesn't have to come from fear, and that true legends are defined by respect, not ratings. Hogan's story stands as a warning that fame without accountability always leads to downfall, and that legacy isn't measured by what you built, but by how you built it.